All right, today we're going to be talking about a little bit about switching your sealed headlamps, whether it be halogen or incandescent, to LED headlamps. We will, in some ways, cover both the two headlamp systems and the four headlamp systems, but for today's purposes, we're mainly going to be concentrating on the high beam, low beam combination and the 5x7 lights. The first thing to consider when you're going to be switching to LED, pretty much anything LED, is the lower amp draw. What you're going to run into in some cases is it's going to cause problems after installation that you will give you ways to check for. But the most important thing before starting anything is to test your headlamps with a battery or 12 volt power supply. Anything other than a 12 volt battery charger that will interfere with its surge protection and cause it not to function properly. So upon checking your headlamps, you're just simply going to want to look at how your headlamp wires are configured. They should be labeled as ground, your white is high beam, and your red is low beam. Now these labels will not be on the headlamp harness itself, but every headlamp comes with this adapter plug, so you can use these to identify the functions on the headlamp itself as well. So what you would do is simply test, ground your terminal and test for high beam and then low beam to make sure both functions are working before you even begin installation. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is, in my experience, I've found that there are very few applications where you can replace a headlamp in a vehicle without removing half of the front end of the vehicle. At the very least, you're going to get into removing the grille, maybe some front marker lights and side marker lights. So by testing your lamps before you begin any of that process, you can eliminate all that wasted time only to find out one of your headlamps isn't working and now your vehicle's apart. Secondly, if you test your headlamps before installation, once the headlamps are installed in the vehicle, if there are issues or something's not working properly, you'll know it's not the headlamps ahead of time. It will have to be something to do with the vehicle harness or the vehicle electronics. So moving forward, we'll go over some of the things that we may run into or can cause issues when making the switch to LED headlamps. The most common is going to be the polarity sensitiveness of the LED headlamps. The ground has to be a ground and hot has to be a hot. If any condition moves that ground, and we'll discuss some of those conditions in a minute, the headlamp is simply not going to come on because you've moved the ground. One of those conditions can have to do mostly with the vehicle wiring itself. Not all vehicle wiring harnesses are going to be configured the same. For example, if on this wire coming out of this terminal is high beam and this terminal is ground, well, that may not be the case in your vehicle harness. So you literally have to take your vehicle harness, which would look similar to this, and take a voltage tester, just a simple 12 volt voltage probe, and test for your ground, test for your high beam and your low beam. If they match the configuration on your headlamp, this adapter will not be necessary. Now, that's a simple way to figure that out ahead of time. Just plug the lamp in. If it works properly, you won't even need to perform that procedure. But if it doesn't, that's the procedure you'll need to follow in order to use this adapter. This would actually be a blank receptacle. You can see I've already installed one of the wires. So once you figure out your vehicle's harness's configuration, you simply insert your ground where the vehicle ground is, like so, and then that will lock in. And once all three are completed, you will have a similar plug as what is on the headlamp, but now it will match your vehicle harness. The other thing is, depending on the type of dimmer switch you have, and I don't have any examples of them for you today, but most of you may already be familiar with them. Most commonly in the United States, all of your dimmer switches are lift to dim, which simply means you turn your headlights on. If they're on high beam, you lift it and it switches to low beam. If you want to go back to high beam, you just lift it again. But in some older vehicles and in most European models that are here in the United States, they have what is called a push-pull dimmer switch. In other words, you're going to push it back for low beam and pull it forward for high beam. If your vehicle is equipped with that kind of a dimmer switch, you're literally not switching hots, you're switching your ground. And by switching the ground, that's going to affect the polarity on the headlamp itself. A couple of things could happen there. Either just your low beam will work, and then when you switch to high beam, you've moved that ground, and the high beam won't work. But it's possible that neither function will work once you move that ground. And if you do have that situation or that application where you have the push to pull, there are logic converters that you can go online and purchase. I think the search parameters I used were just LED headlamp converters. And that just basically switches the logic from moving the ground back to moving the hot the same way a lift-to-dim dimmer switch would be. And then again, once your lamps are installed, once you have all your wiring configured correctly, always be sure and test your headlamps again after installation before on-road driving. Things can happen once you're on the road that you might not have seen or figured out while the installation was going on. So just to be sure that once you're going down the road, everything is functioning properly, turn your headlamps on, check the dim and check the high and low to see if all the features are working correctly. In the 4-lamp headlamp system, which I said we would touch on just a little bit, it's a little different in that you have a low beam and a separate high beam on each side. Now in these cases, and possibly in the cases of the combination lamps too, you'll always have a relay. In the case of a low beam, high beam, you have 2 relays. You have one for your low beam and one for your high beam. Now going back to the lesser amp draw of the LED headlamps, you can run into an application where the low or minimum amp threshold of your relay is not low enough to accommodate the low beam by itself when engaged into the low beam. In that case, when you're on low beam, they just won't come on because there's not enough load to trigger the dimmer's relay. But when they switch to high beam, both come on, your low and your high beam, because that relay is now sending through your dimmer switch voltage to your low beam and your high beam, which increases your amp draw, which allows that relay to function properly. If you run into those applications, your only fix is to apply a load resistor or some other type of resistance to bring that threshold back up to what the relay is looking for. Other than that, again, each lamp will come with an adapter if needed to match your vehicle harness system. The installation instructions are quite clear. So that should cover it for today. Thank you.